She didn't sleep the night before, not because of nightmares, but because she was afraid to close her eyes. Every morning, the walk to school felt like walking into danger. The looks, the whispers, the fear that followed her down the street. And the worst part? No one seemed to care. She told the adults. They said she was imagining things. They said kids would be kids. They said she should be brave. But bravery doesn't stop fear when you're 8 years old. So on one quiet morning, with her backpack heavy on her shoulders and her heart racing faster than her feet, she did something no child should ever have to do. She walked up to the most intimidating group of men in town. Leather vests, roaring motorcycles, faces people crossed the street to avoid, and asked them for help. Not money, not revenge. Just this. Can you walk me to school so I feel safe? What happened next didn't just protect one little girl. It shattered stereotypes. It exposed a failure no one wanted to admit. And it sent a message so loud that an entire town was forced to listen. Before we dive into Maya's story, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city and country in the comments right now. Are you watching from your living room in Texas, your kitchen in the UK, your office break room in Australia? Let me know, because this story about courage, community, and protection, it's universal. It crosses borders. And I want to see how far this message reaches today. Maya Carter was 8 years old when fear became her morning routine. Every day started the same way. Her grandmother would pack her lunch, kiss her forehead, and watch from the porch as Maya walked the 6 blocks to Riverside Elementary. 6 blocks through a neighborhood that used to feel like home. But something had changed. It started small. A group of older teenagers hanging out on the corner watching her pass. At first, they just stared. Then came the comments, quiet enough that adults wouldn't hear, loud enough that Maya couldn't ignore them. Look at her walking all alone. Nobody wants to walk with you? You scared yet? Maya would grip her backpack straps tighter and walk faster. Her grandmother told her to hold her head high. Her teacher told her to ignore them. The school counselor said bullies lose interest if you don't react. But they didn't lose interest. The comments became threats, subtle at first, a step toward her as she passed, a laugh that followed her down the block, and the feeling of being hunted before the school bell even rang. One morning, someone threw a rock. It missed her by inches, clattering against the sidewalk behind her. She didn't turn around. She ran the last 2 blocks to school, tears streaming down her face, backpack bouncing against her spine. When she told her teacher, the woman sighed with exhaustion. Did you see who threw it? No, but... Then there's nothing we can do, sweetheart. Just stay aware of your surroundings. Stay aware. As if an 8-year-old could protect herself from teenagers who saw her vulnerability as entertainment. Maya stopped telling people. Because every time she did, the response was the same. Minimize, dismiss, move on. Adults had bigger problems. She was supposed to toughen up. But at 8 years old, 8, toughness feels like a lie you tell yourself while your hands shake. The morning she decided to ask the bikers for help, she had woken up at 5 a.m., staring at her ceiling in the dark. Her grandmother was still asleep. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a motorcycle engine somewhere in the neighborhood. She thought about pretending to be sick. But she'd done that twice already this month, and her grandmother was starting to ask questions. She thought about asking to be driven. But her grandmother didn't have a car, and the bus didn't run this early. She thought about every option except the one thing she actually needed: for someone to make her feel safe. By the time the sun came up, Maya had made a decision that would change everything. The adults in Maya's life weren't cruel, if they were overwhelmed. Her grandmother worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day. She loved Maya fiercely, but exhaustion didn't leave much room for problem solving. When Maya mentioned being scared, her grandmother would pull her close and say, "Baby, the world is hard, but you're harder." It was meant to be encouraging. It landed like abandonment. At school, the response was bureaucratic indifference dressed up as policy. The principal listened with folded hands and a sympathetic nod, then explained that without evidence, video footage, multiple witnesses, a clear pattern of documented incidents, there was nothing the school could do. They couldn't punish students based on one child's word. "We take bullying very seriously," the principal said, adjusting her glasses. But we also have to be fair to everyone involved." Fair to everyone. Except the child too terrified to walk to school. Maya's teacher tried. She really did. She kept Maya inside during recess for a week, thinking proximity to an adult would help, but it only delayed the problem. The teenagers weren't at school. They were on the street. And the street had no supervision. The school counselor offered breathing exercises. When you feel afraid, take a deep breath and count to 10. Fear is just a feeling. You can control it. But fear isn't just a feeling when someone is actively trying to hurt you. Fear is your body screaming that danger is real. Maya went home one afternoon and Googled how to not be scared anymore. The results were a mix of inspirational quotes and ads for self-defense classes she couldn't afford. So she closed the laptop and stared at the wall. That night, lying in bed, she heard the motorcycles again. They passed by her street every evening around the same time. A deep, rumbling sound that rattled windows and made car alarms chirp. Her grandmother would mutter about noise ordinances, but Maya found the sound strangely comforting. Because the bikers didn't hide. They didn't sneak. They moved through the world like they belonged there, like no one could touch them. And Maya thought, what if they could make me feel that way too? The Iron Guardians. Motorcycle Club had a reputation. They were the kind of men you didn't make eye contact with at a stoplight. Leather vests covered in patches, tattoos crawling up their necks, beards that looked like they could hide weapons. Bikes so loud they announced their arrival 3 blocks away. Young people crossed the street when they saw them coming. Parents pulled their children closer. Store owners watched them through security cameras, hands near the phone, ready to dial 911 if things went sideways. But here's the thing about reputations. They're built on perception, not truth. The Iron Guardians weren't a gang. They were a brotherhood of veterans, tradesmen, and working-class men who rode motorcycles and valued loyalty above everything else. They didn't start trouble, but they didn't walk away from it either. Their clubhouse was an old garage on the edge of Maya's neighborhood, surrounded by a chain-link fence and a hand-painted sign that read, "Respect is earned, loyalty is returned." Inside, the walls were covered in photos. Charity rides, toy drives, fundraisers for families who'd lost everything in house fires. The Iron Guardians didn't advertise their good deeds, they just did them. The president of the club was a man named Marcus Hammer Cole. At 53, he had the kind of presence that filled a room. Broad shoulders, a salt and pepper beard, and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Hammer had served 2 tours in Iraq before coming home to a country that didn't know what to do with broken soldiers. The VA failed him. The job market failed him. But his brothers in the club caught him when he fell. Now, he spent his days working construction and his nights making sure younger members didn't make the same mistakes he did. He wasn't a saint. He'd been arrested twice in his 20s. Bar fights, nothing violent beyond stupid pride. But he'd grown up. He'd learned that strength wasn't about intimidation. It was about protection. And on the morning Maya approached him, he was sitting outside the clubhouse, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise, when he saw a little girl in a pink hoodie walking toward him with her fists clenched at her sides. Maya had rehearsed what she would say. She'd practiced in the mirror, whispered it to herself on the walk over, tried to make her voice sound strong and confident, the way adults always told her to be. But when she stood in front of Hammer, looking up at a man who seemed twice as tall as any person she'd ever met, all her rehearsed words disappeared. Hammer set his coffee down slowly. "You lost, kid?" Maya shook her head. Her backpack felt heavier than it had a minute ago. Behind Hammer, two other bikers stepped out of the garage. Tank, a massive man with a shaved head and a scar across his jaw, and Ricky, younger, leaner, with tattoos covering both arms. Tank crossed his arms. "Everything okay?" Maya's heart was pounding so hard she thought they could probably hear it. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "I need help." Hammer's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He crouched down, getting closer to her eye level. "What kind of help?" Maya's voice cracked. "Can you walk me to school, so I feel safe?" The silence that followed was so complete it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Tank and Ricky exchanged a look. Hammer stayed perfectly still, studying Maya's face. The way her hands trembled, the way her eyes were too tired for a child, the way she held herself like someone who'd already been let down too many times. "Why don't you feel safe?" Hammer asked quietly. And then, for the first time in weeks, Maya told the truth. All of it. The teenagers, the threats, the rock, the adults who didn't believe her. The mornings she woke up wishing she didn't have to leave the house. The fear that sat in her stomach like a stone, heavy and cold and constant. She talked until her voice gave out, and when she finished, she looked down at her shoes, ashamed that she'd said so much. Hammer stood slowly. He looked at Tank, at Ricky, then back at Maya. "What's your name?" "Maya." "Maya, how old are you?" 8. Hammer nodded, his jaw tight. "Where's your school?" "Riverside Elementary, 6 blocks that way." She pointed. "And these kids, do they go to your school?" "No, they're older. Teenagers. They're always on the corner by the bodega." Hammer was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's me. Get everyone to the clubhouse. Now." He hung up and looked at Maya. "You want breakfast?" Maya blinked. "What?" "Breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast. You eat yet?" She shook her head. "Come on, then." Within 20 minutes, 12 bikers were sitting inside the clubhouse. They'd dropped what they were doing, skipped work, left job sites, canceled appointments because when Hammer called, you showed up. That was the code. Maya sat in a folding chair, eating scrambled eggs while grown men in leather vests listened to her story like it was the most important thing they'd ever heard. She told them everything again, this time with more detail. The corner where the teenagers hung out, the times they were there, the things they said, the way no one ever stopped them. When she finished, Tank was the first to speak. "And the school won't do anything?" Maya shook her head. "What about the cops?" "My grandma called once. They said they'd drive by more, but I never saw them." Ricky leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "These kids, do they mess with anyone else?" "I don't know. Maybe. I see other kids cross the street to avoid them." Hammer stood and walked to the window, staring out at the street. His voice was calm, but there was something sharp underneath it. "So we've got a corner full of teenagers terrorizing children, and no one's doing anything about it." "That's what I'm hearing," Tank said. Hammer turned around. "Then we do something about it." Ricky frowned. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Maya asked us to walk her to school, so we walk her to school." Tank grinned. "Just us?" "Sure, all of us." Hammer's smile was cold. "All of us." The Iron Guardians didn't rush. They planned. Over the next 2 hours, they mapped out Maya's route. They identified the corner where the teenagers congregated. They called in a favor from a buddy who worked at the school district and confirmed that Riverside Elementary started at 8:15 a.m. Then they made a list. Who had the morning free? Who could get off work? Who had bikes that ran clean and loud? By the end of the day, they had 23 confirmed riders. Hammer called Maya's grandmother and introduced himself. It was a short conversation. He explained who he was, what Maya had asked for, and what they intended to do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Maya's grandmother said, "You promise me she'll be safe." "You have my word." Another pause. Okay." That night, Hammer sent a group text to the club. "Tomorrow, 7:45 a.m., full colors, clean bikes, no drinking, no smoking, no cursing. We're escorting a kid to school. Set the tone." The responses came fast. "I'm in. Wouldn't miss it. See you at dawn." Hammer set his phone down and looked at the photo on his wall, a picture of himself in uniform, standing with his platoon in the desert. He'd spent years protecting people who didn't know his name. Tomorrow, he'd do it again. The sun was barely up when the motorcycles started arriving. One by one, they pulled into the street outside Maya's house, bikes gleaming, engines rumbling, riders in full club colors. The Iron Guardians didn't do anything halfway. By 7:40 a.m., 23 motorcycles lined the block. Neighbors stepped onto their porches. Curtains twitched. And a few people pulled out their phones, recording video, unsure if they were witnessing protection or a threat. Maya stood on her porch, frozen. Her grandmother stood beside her, one hand on Maya's shoulder. "You sure about this, baby?" Maya nodded, even though her legs felt like they might give out. Hammer walked up the steps, his boots heavy on the wood. He crouched down in front of Maya, just like he had the day before. "You ready?" Maya's voice was small. "Yeah." "Good. Here's how this works. You walk in front. We ride behind you. Slow. No one's gonna touch you. No one's even gonna look at you wrong. Understand?" Maya nodded. "And if you get scared, you raise your hand. We stop. Deal?" "Deal." Hammer stood and looked at her grandmother. "We'll get her there safe." Her grandmother's eyes were wet. "Oh, I know." Hammer turned and walked back to his bike. He swung his leg over, started the engine, and raised his hand. The other riders followed. 23 engines roaring to life, the sound echoing off the buildings like thunder. Maya took a breath, adjusted her backpack, and started walking. Behind her, the motorcycles rolled forward, slow and steady, matching her pace. The formation was perfect. 3 bikes wide, rows staggered, a wall of leather and chrome and controlled power. Maya walked 6 blocks, and for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid. At the corner by the bodega, the teenagers were already there. 5 of them, leaning against the wall, hoodies up, hands in pockets. They saw Maya coming and straightened up, ready with their usual routine. Then they heard the engines. The lead teenager took a step forward and stopped cold when he saw the motorcycles. 23 of them, rolling in perfect formation, filling the entire street. Hammer locked eyes with the kid. Didn't say a word. Didn't have to. The teenagers scattered. Maya kept walking, head high, a small smile breaking across her face. By the time they reached the school, a crowd had gathered. Parents, teachers, students. Everyone staring as an 8-year-old girl walked up to the front doors with an army of bikers behind her. Hammer stopped his bike at the curb. He got off, walked to Maya, and knelt down one more time. "You good?" Maya nodded, eyes shining. "Thank you. We'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until you don't need us anymore." Maya threw her arms around his neck. Hammer closed his eyes just for a moment, and hugged her back. The video went viral by lunchtime. Someone had recorded the entire escort, Maya walking calmly, the bikers behind her, the teenagers scattering like roaches when the light turned on. It was posted to Facebook, then Twitter, then TikTok, then every local news outlet in the state. Within hours, it had millions of views. The comments section exploded. This is what real men look like. Where were the adults before this? I'm not crying. You're crying. This little girl is braver than most grown people. But not everyone was celebrating. The school district issued a statement expressing concern about unauthorized individuals near school property. The police department said they were investigating the matter. Local politicians posted vague messages about community safety and working together. Translation. They were embarrassed. Because the video didn't just show bikers protecting a child. It showed a system that had failed her. Adults who didn't listen. Institutions that didn't care. A community that looked the other way until someone else stepped up. And now the whole world was watching. The next morning, the Iron Guardians showed up again. This time, 30 riders. The morning after that, 40. By the end of the week, Maya's school escort had become a community event. Parents started walking with them. Neighbors joined in. Other kids who'd been bullied asked if they could walk with Maya too. The school principal called an emergency meeting with Maya's grandmother and Hammer. She sat across from them, hands folded, trying to regain control of a narrative that had slipped through her fingers. We appreciate what you've done for Maya, she said carefully. But we have policies. Hammer cut her off. Your policies failed her. The principal stiffened. That's not fair. Fair? Hammer leaned forward. You know what's not fair? An 8-year-old being terrorized on her way to school while adults tell her to be brave. You know what's not fair? A child having to ask strangers for help because the people whose job it is to protect her couldn't be bothered. The room went silent. Maya's grandmother spoke quietly. He's right. The principal looked down at her desk. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. You're right. We should have done more. We will do more. Good, Hammer said. Because we're not going anywhere until she's safe. Actually, we're not going anywhere even after that. This is our neighborhood too. The principal nodded. I understand. And for the first time, it seemed like she actually did. 3 months later, Maya walked to school alone. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The teenagers were gone, some arrested for unrelated charges, others simply deciding this corner wasn't worth the trouble anymore. The school had hired additional crossing guards and implemented a buddy system for students who felt unsafe. But more than that, the neighborhood had woken up. People paid attention now. Parents watched the streets. Neighbors introduced themselves. The community that had been silent for so long found its voice. The Iron Guardians still rode by every morning. Not as an escort, just as a presence. A reminder that protection wasn't about fear. It was about showing up. Ed Hammer still checked in with Maya every week. Sometimes he'd bring her homework help from Ricky, who'd been good at math before he dropped out. Sometimes he'd just sit on her grandmother's porch and drink coffee, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. One afternoon, Maya asked him a question. Why did you help me? You didn't even know me. Hammer thought about it for a moment. When I was overseas, we had a saying, leave no one behind. Didn't matter if you knew them or not. If someone needed help, you helped. That's what real strength is. Maya smiled. You're not as scary as people think. Hammer laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that matched his bike. Good. Scary is easy. Being kind when the world tells you not to be? That's the hard part. The story of Maya and the Iron Guardians spread far beyond their town. It became a case study in what happens when communities fail their children, and what happens when ordinary people decide to do something about it. Other motorcycle clubs started similar programs. Schools revised their bullying policies. Parents had harder conversations with their kids about standing up instead of standing by. And Maya? She grew up knowing that courage doesn't mean never being afraid. It means asking for help when you need it. It means trusting that some people, even the ones who look intimidating, have your back. She learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when everyone else looks away. And she learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is ask a simple question. Can you walk me to school so I feel safe? Because you never know who's been waiting their whole life to say yes. Now, this story crossed state lines, oceans, and borders. It reminded people that protection isn't about power, it's about presence. That real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. And sometimes they kneel down to make an 8-year-old feel safe. If this story moved you, share it. Because every Maya deserves her iron guardians, and every community deserves to remember what it means to protect its children.